Hello and welcome to the Break Exchange webinar. My name is Kim Whitmore. I'm the director of the Break Exchange. I'm a nursing professor at Marquette University in Wisconsin in the United States, and it's a pleasure to have you join us here today. And for those watching the recording, thank you for taking time to connect. I am going to just give us a little bit of background about the Break Exchange before we introduce our presenter today. For those of you who may be new to the Break Exchange, the Break Exchange is an international group of researchers, respite providers, agencies, and individuals who are committed to building a culture of evidence-based respite care. We have some incredible partners in this work: the International Short Break Association, the Arch National Respite Network and Resource Center, Marquette University College of Nursing, and Shared Care Scotland. There are many benefits of joining the Break Exchange: connecting, learning, sharing, and collaborating with each other. For connecting, this is a great opportunity to connect with a global network, again, of researchers, providers, agencies, and individuals. We have many ways to do that. One of the exciting ways we just started is a monthly networking hour, which will be every second Monday from 12 to 1 Central Standard Time. And we have a growing network of almost 200 members from 15 countries that are part of this exchange. And so a great way to meet other people who have some shared interest in advancing respite care and supports for individuals with disabilities. It's a great way to learn about evidence-based respite practices and other related research that's happening around the world, and also share what you're doing. Share evidence-based practices and research with your international colleagues, and to feature your work in our e-newsletter that goes out monthly. So if you're not getting our e-newsletter, make sure that you sign up for our email list so you can continue to stay updated on the Break Exchange. We also can share information on our website and social media platforms, or invite you to present a webinar like we have today. So if you have any interest in doing that, please feel free to reach out. We also hope that the Break Exchange is a way to help connect individuals for collaboration. So an opportunity to meet other people with shared interests who may be interested in working on a project with you, whether that's an evaluation or a research project. And you can leverage this exchange to identify those partners. One way to do that is on our website. You can create a member profile, and that will allow other members of the Break Exchange to search in our member database to help identify similar-minded, interested people. So encourage you to fill out that member profile and check out the searchable member database if you have not done so already. So there are lots of ways to stay connected. Again, we have multiple social media platforms that we engage with, so encourage you to follow us, like us, and engage in conversation online. Visit our website where you can join our email list and complete your member profile at the Break Exchange website listed here. And always, at any time, if you have questions, ideas, or want more information, feel free to email us at info@breakexchange.org. And just a reminder to all of us that are doing work in these spaces that it's important for us to also practice self-care, as stated here, that self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. So my hope for all of you today is that you are able to find those small moments for self-care to take care of yourself in this crazy times that we're living in. So without further ado, I am going to pass it over to our featured presenter today. Brandon Chase is a manager of the community living supports and the project manager of As Safe as Possible. This is a project based in Canada that is working on addressing issues on issues of introducing how this project discussing the main reasons why people with an intellectual disability are at risk of victimization. And I will let him share much more about what he's doing when we look at human trafficking and exploitation of individuals of intellectual disabilities and how important that is in the work that we do interacting with this population. So I will pass it off to Brandon, and thank you again for being here today. We're so excited to hear about this important topic that is so under talked about in this area, and so really a unique opportunity for us today. So thanks for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Kim, and it's really nice to be here. I'm actually from Canada, from Ontario, Canada, really, really south. Actually, I don't think you can get more south in Canada. So thank you for having me, and really, really looking forward to talking to everybody today about this topic. Again, just as Kim said, it is a very important topic, and I do certainly think it is under discussed. So just kind of give a background of as safe as possible for everybody. The project was funded by the Ministry of the Solicitor General's Safer and Vital Communities Grant and created by Community Living Essex County in partnership with the Ontario Provincial Police, Legal Assistance of Windsor, and the Windsor-Essex Children's Aid Society. So when we were building this project, right out of the gate, we had a lot of really amazing partners to help us develop this project. And again, it's so fundamentally important to have those resources because first of all, we want to make the material as accessible as possible. Right? We want to have accessible learning for everybody, but we also want to make sure that this is really what community partners want to hear as well, because when we created this project, we actually created two separate curriculums. So, I mean, we can view it as kind of two separate pieces of information that we were giving everybody to ensure that, people with intellectual disabilities stay safe. On the one hand, we have a curriculum designed to empower people with an intellectual disability to avoid victimization through education about exploitation and human trafficking. On the other hand, we have a curriculum designed to educate police, justice personnel, and others about the abilities and needs of people with intellectual disabilities. So heaven forbid, if someone with an intellectual disability were victimized and came in contact with the justice system has those tools to assist people with intellectual disabilities. So really the education we're providing with as safe as possible is twofold. We want to, like I said, we want to educate people that we support, but we also want to educate the public about how best to support those people if they were to come in contact with the justice system. So this education that we have here is provided on our website, communitylivingessex.org/ASAP. And when you go to the website, you'll see that we have online modules, and those are available to everybody. I mean, we do face-to-face training, but I know we're certainly in the age of face-to-face training becoming less and less common given the pandemic. But fortunately, we do have those online resources for everybody as well. Strongly suggest you go to the website, and certainly I'll post the links later in the presentation. But I think it would be fitting to start the presentation with the trailer for the project, just to kind of introduce what the project looked like. This is how we introduced the project when we launched it to our community partners, to the people that we support, and now obviously to everybody watching this today.
Human trafficking is not just an international problem, it's a local problem, and it can affect anybody.
I went from having everything even with him to being on the basement floor.
This is a project by Community Living Essex County in partnership with the OPP, Legal Assistance of Windsor, and Windsor-Essex Children's Aid Society.
Some people don't know how to speak up for themselves, so that's why they keep on doing stuff like this.
People with intellectual disabilities are 4 times more likely to be victimized.
Because they think they won't get in trouble.
Victims can be as young as 14 years old and even younger.
Our country is working very hard to identify human trafficking and to move forward in this issue. But at this point, we aren't getting the full picture of what's really happening.
So I tried to get out, and I'm like, okay, where am I gonna go?
We want to help victims. We're not there to judge anybody. We're not there to get anybody into trouble.
The goal of the project is to empower people with intellectual disabilities to avoid becoming victims of human trafficking and exploitation. It's also meant to educate our local justice community, including law enforcement, about the needs and abilities of people with intellectual disabilities. So if they were to come in contact with the justice system has more tools in their toolbox to assist people with intellectual disabilities through this process.
I want people to remember that they have the right to say no.
Human trafficking has been compared to the modern form of slavery.
These guys own me. Like, I'm being human trafficked right now. I have no way out.
So that was the trailer for the project to introduce everybody to what the project is all about. And really there we do. I mean, we focus on what exploitation and human trafficking are. And I think obviously that would be a really good next step in this presentation, is to introduce the audience to what these things are. I mean, human trafficking is certainly something that has been a lot more common in public discourse. And, the thing about human trafficking, of course, is that it's not an easy concept to understand. I mean, the way I usually tell people is human trafficking can be seen as a process. It's not, one exact moment where something illegal happens. Exploitation may be seen that way, but human trafficking, it's a process, which is why it's so hard to detect sometimes, because the unfortunate reality is once you're in that lifestyle and you are being trafficked, people don't realize it until it's too late. Because of this process. And we're certainly going to talk about that in the next slide. But before we get into that, I just wanted to kind of give a brief explanation of what exploitation is. I mean, some of you may know what it is and some of you may not. But really human exploitation can be seen as taking advantage of somebody or using somebody to benefit. So the example that I usually use in the curriculum is, you're only friends with somebody to use their swimming pool. Right? I mean, that's exploiting them for their resources. They have a swimming pool, you want to use it, you befriend them, you become their friend just to use their swimming pool. That's, it's not morally okay, right? We want to be friends with people because we like them as people, but it's not illegal. Where this becomes illegal and a crime is when you're forced to do something against your will. Right? So through violence or threats of violence, you're forced to do something that you wouldn't normally do. So that's what criminal exploitation looks like. And it's really important to understand what exploitation is, because exploitation is a part of human trafficking and that process, like I was talking about. So we'll move on to what human trafficking is. And like I said, human trafficking can be seen as a process. And really it has three fundamental parts. It has the act, the means, and the purpose. So we're going to go through each one of these. And again, I think that will help everybody understand what human trafficking is. Again, it's not just one thing that happens that's illegal. It's a series of things that happens that unfortunately culminates in the exploitation of somebody. So the act refers to what is done to a person, right? So this can include the recruitment of a person in order to exploit them, the transferring or transporting of a person in order to exploit them. So in some cases, a person may travel to another location. We see this a lot with domestic servitude or labor trafficking, right? So when they travel, it could be by bus, by train, or airplane. I mean, this could seem really legitimate, right? People get excited. They get to go somewhere else to work. They can make some money. And they can do this with legitimate documents. But, unfortunately, in other cases, the trafficker may force the person to travel in an illegal or unsafe manner, like in the trunk of a car, and with using phony documents like a fake passport. This is common as well. And again, this is where, the trafficker can use either one of these things: legitimate means to get somebody to a place in order to exploit them, or illegitimate means to get somebody to a place to exploit them. So, either way, this is kind of the beginning stages of trafficking. So then another aspect of the act is harboring or receiving someone. And this happens when a trafficker houses or hides a person in order to exploit them. Again, this housing or hiding can be done in a very legitimate way. It could be done in a hotel room. It could be done in somebody's home. And it could seem very, very nice. In other cases, unfortunately, it could be done in a basement or an attic where, living conditions are deplorable and, people they suffer physical abuse because of where they are staying. So, I mean, it could really go either way. It could be very exploitative, or it could not seem so exploitative in the beginning, but as time goes on, people unfortunately are led to believe that they're in a situation that's very, very nice. But as time goes on, they become exploited. And I commonly refer to this as the boiling frogs, where you turn up the heat and the frog doesn't realize it's boiling until it's too late. This happens with this case too. It just progressively gets worse and worse. And the victim, unfortunately, doesn't realize what's happening until it's too late. So again, that's the act. Again, the act refers to what is done to a person. So recruiting, transporting, harboring, those things happen in the beginning stages of human trafficking. Now, the means also refers to the how a trafficker gains control over somebody. So it can include some of these that I'm going to discuss, but it can include one or more than one. Again, we see human trafficking as a process. So just because I'm saying that these are different ways to gain control doesn't mean they can't all coexist as one kind of part of human trafficking together. So the first way is grooming, and grooming, unfortunately, is very common, and it looks like a perfect relationship, and we see this a lot in sex trafficking. So the person who's exploiting somebody will paint this picture that they're their boyfriend or their girlfriend, their significant other. It could be seen as a perfect friendship or a perfect romantic relationship. The trafficker will pretend to be the most amazing person in your world. They will often offer gifts, money, and a really great lifestyle. And they'll say they understand you in a way that you thought no one ever could. And then they'll convince somebody that they know them best, right? They'll say, I know you best. I know what's best for you. Look what everything I've done for you, right? And they'll use that to gain trust and then in turn exploit somebody. So ultimately, this will lead to, well, sometimes it's referred to in sex trafficking as the Romeo pimp. If you ever attended a human trafficking conference before, that's commonly what this is referred to. But here we're going to call it grooming. Like I said, pictures painted that is false, but it's really what somebody wants to hear. We all want to be close. We all want to have a romantic relationship. We all want to have a close friendship. So when you think a romantic partner or a friend is coming to you saying, well, we can't pay the bills anymore, I need your help, you need to go, why don't you go into prostitution? And we're going to make a lot of money really quick. Just go into it, make some money, and get out of it. Unfortunately, that's a slippery slope, and that's how a lot of sex trafficking starts. So that's grooming, and that's how one way a trafficker can gain control over somebody. Another way is violence or threats of violence. So, I mean, that's fairly self-explanatory, but it's a really powerful way for a trafficker to create fear in a person, is to threaten them and make them agree to do something they wouldn't otherwise do. Coercion, traffickers will often use fear as a way to gain control. Trafficker may lead a person to believe they will never be able to see their family again if they don't do what the trafficker wants. Another example is a trafficker convincing a person they would be in a lot of trouble with the police if they don't do what they are told, right? So if you don't do this, I'm going to tell the police that you've done other things, and then you're going to get in trouble. So the best way to avoid getting in trouble is to do what I'm asking you, and I won't tell anybody. So that's a common way to gain control as well. Deception is where a trafficker may deceive a person by offering them a really great job. This is labor trafficking, right? One job that pays really well, maybe as a nanny in another community. When they arrive in this other community, the person will learn that the job is actually something much different. This isn't a nanny position at all. It's something they would have never normally agreed to. So, domestic servitude, working all hours of the day and night with very little pay and very little support. So unfortunately, that can happen as well. Finally, another way a trafficker can gain control is through abuses of power. And unfortunately, sometimes people in power can be traffickers, and they can use that power to exploit somebody. Don't see that very commonly, but I mean, certainly, if an employer seems legitimate, they have power, right? Because if you're looking for a job and you're looking to make money, then your employer would be the person who has the power to allow you the opportunity to make that money through your labor. But they can use that to, say that you offer them a certain fee. You need to pay that off first before they give you the money that you deserve. And unfortunately, we see that a lot in labor trafficking. So again, that's the means. And again, I'll reiterate what those means are that a trafficker uses to gain control. So grooming, violence, coercion, deception, and abuse of power. So the purpose, and now the purpose focuses on why somebody is trafficked. In Canada, our criminal code defines human trafficking in two different ways. We have labor trafficking on the one hand, and we have sex trafficking on the other hand. what we're noticing now as we kind of research this topic and we talk to survivors of human trafficking is that it's much more broad than just saying, you know, it's either labor trafficking or sex trafficking. There are other areas that that human trafficking is spreading out towards. But we'll talk about that in this section. So one purpose of human trafficking, as I just said, is sexual exploitation. So people can be trafficked to do all types of sex work, including prostitution and pornography. The trafficked person will be forced to hand over all or some of their money they earn to their trafficker. Again, unfortunately, in a lot of these cases, they think it's their boyfriend or their girlfriend or a friend. And they're doing this to pay the bills or to help this person, when in actuality, they're just being exploited. Another purpose or why somebody is trafficked is forced labor. Again, this is labor trafficking. So traffickers will sometimes force people to do unsafe work and pay them very little, if at all. The trafficker will often tell the worker they owe a big debt. You know, they'll make up this idea that, oh, there's a recruitment fee. It took me a lot of money and time to get you here from another area of this country, for example. So you're going to need to work and pay off that recruitment fee before you make any money of your own. Unfortunately, it's almost impossible to pay this fee off because, again, I mean, the employer is exploiting this person, right? So sometimes these people will work at regular jobs alongside of other people who aren't being trafficked, you know, for example, in construction or in a greenhouse. So it's very, very difficult sometimes to tell when someone is being trafficked. So that's why prevention is the best method to stop this crime, and education and knowing how to keep yourself safe is so vitally important, because like I said, once you start in the lifestyle of being trafficked, it's very, very difficult to get out. Again, difficult because you may rely on this income and this unfortunately abusive lifestyle, or you just may not realize it until it's too late. So that's why, again, education is so important. And again, encouraging everybody to reach out to communitylivingessex.org/ASAP for the resources to better educate you on these things and how to keep yourself safe. Another reason why people are trafficked is domestic servitude. I've talked about this a couple of times, similar to labor trafficking. Some people will be trafficked to become servants, cooking and cleaning and running a whole house. They will be expected to be available at all hours of the day and night with very little pay and very little support. Okay, so basically a live-in nanny that is not treated very well, kept in deplorable conditions, and hardly paid at all for their work. So that would be domestic servitude. And finally, we have forced crime. And this is kind of an example of how we're getting away from notions of, you know, human trafficking and sex trafficking or labor trafficking. Forced crime is kind of an example of, well, it's not really either of those things. Some people will be forced to commit crimes, such as committing bank fraud or selling and delivering drugs for someone else's gain. Again, they're forced to do this. They don't want to do this, but they're trafficked for, I guess in this case, their labor, right? Because they're selling drugs and you know, committing illegal activities for somebody else, right? So that's another reason why people are trafficked. So just to kind of summarize those things, sexual exploitation is one reason why people are trafficked. Forced labor is another. Domestic servitude is the third, and forced crime is the fourth. So I do want to look at the time. Okay. We're going to watch this. Actually, this video comes to us from one of our survivors of human trafficking that so graciously donated her time and effort into telling us her story, her experiences when she was trafficked. So this is her story. And as we're watching this, I want you to think about the act, the means, and the purpose, and how human trafficking kind of unfolds as this process. So I'm going to play this video, and we should be okay with time. Yes, we're going to be fine. Okay.
Anybody can be a victim, a mother, a daughter, a child, it could be anybody. With me, I was 23 and I was a victim. Had a normal life, and I was married. My marriage ended and I became a victim. I had this friend, and he was supportive of me, and he fed me drugs, and yeah, so I ended up dating him. This is the guy that after 2 years, I realized that I was being human trafficked, right? Everything that I had with my husband, he gave me. So, because my husband, we were well off. So whatever I wanted, I had. Like, I had a Harley, I had a new home, I was in a nice place, had money, had drugs, whenever I wanted them. And at the time, I didn't realize, like, I was doing lots, but I didn't even realize what I was doing until about 2 years into it. I kind of had an idea that I was being human trafficked, but I was like, no, I'm not. Like, he wouldn't do that to me. Like, he loves me, and you know, that's not what this is. And then I got videotaped. I knew that I got videotaped a couple of times when I was really high. But the last little bit of, I went from being like the special girl to being like the nobody, right? Like, because I was getting older, I needed them for everything. I was a complete drug addict. I was injecting at the time, and I'd have to do stuff just to even get high, like, right? The last little bit is when I was in a basement. I went from having everything, even with him, to being in a basement floor, in a cold basement floor with just on gravel with a blanket. And I remember waking up and saying, oh, holy shit, like, these guys own me. Like, I'm being human trafficked right now and I have no way out. So that went on for many years that I couldn't get out because I was a complete mess. I had nothing. I didn't even know how much money I had. There was days that, like, I would have to, like, do so much just to get high, and I was such a drug addict because at this time I'm a drug addict for about 15 years and I'm injecting. So, I mean, I can't do anything without a pill or without something. And they knew that. So yeah, I struggled with that. I was in that life for, I think it was close to 15 years that I was stuck in that life. And I went from being their bottom girl to being there like nothing. I was just used and I was abused and I was old, right? And they had all young ones coming in. So I tried to get out. I'd leave and like it was in the winter. I remember I left a couple of times and I'd go outside and it'd be cold out and I'd like hide behind their house. And I'm like, okay, where am I gonna go? Like, people are scared of these guys. Like, I have their name branded on my neck. Everybody knows them. No one's ever gonna help me. I lost my family. Nobody wants me. Nobody normal wants me. Nobody even out there would even help me as far as with drugs or anything. No one at that time would probably even sleep with me, even to get a drug from somebody, because I was owned by these people, right? So I'd sit outside and I'd say, okay, well, I gotta go back because I have nothing. So I ended up going back in, and when I would go back, it'd be like 10 times worse than it was before. But I'd always try to leave. I'd always leave, and I'd go down the road and I'd think about it and be like, okay, I'm gonna have to go back. I don't have nothing. Nobody's gonna bother with me. I'm not even gonna be able to get somebody to sleep with me. I'd start the whole thing again, thinking about, okay, I'm leaving, but like, what am I gonna do now? I'm gonna be hungry. I'm not gonna have a place to sleep. At least here I have a place to sleep and I can get high. Who cares if they beat me? I'll just keep going back. But then this last time, I was in the basement and like, so I was allowed out, but like if I did something wrong, they put me in the basement, right? So this last little bit, I don't know what happened. Like, I would always reach out, but I'd be like, no, I can't do this. I can't do this, and I'd always go back, right? And then this one time it was like, you know what, I just have to try to do this. If they find me, if they whatever, that's okay. But at least I have to try. Like, I can't just go for a couple hours and come back. Like, if I don't get out this time, I'm not gonna get out. It's either I'm gonna be in prison or they're gonna kill me. Or I'm gonna overdose, either one. And I've seen so much that it was just, I had enough. So I got out. I was supposed to go to see a drug addiction counselor. And I ended up calling him on the phone and I'm saying, like, I'm done, I'm not coming. There's no hope for me, nobody's gonna help me. Nobody wants to help me, right? Like, I'm so sick and tired of you people telling me that you're gonna help me when there's nothing you can do, right? Like, there's no help for me. And he said to me, Jennifer, I was like, look, his name was Dale. And I'm like, look, Dale, I can't go see you because you're going to give me hope and there's no hope. Like, this is what I have to accept. So he said to me, just hold on and I'll call you back. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I didn't really say that. I had a whole lot of other things to say to him too, but I'm not going to say it on camera. And he called me, he said to me, let me hold on to hope. And he said, till you're ready, take it back. And I'm like, yeah, well, there's no hope right now anymore with me. And I hung up with him. And then he called me back and he gave me this number to this lady. And he said, look, she kind of knows your story and she's trying to help women. He said, it's up to you. You can do what you want. If you really want to try to get out, you can get out. If you don't, but here's the number. So of course I tell him not calling, but as soon as I hang up, I call. And there was something about her voice that I trusted her, right? Like I didn't trust the cops. I didn't trust her because everybody would turn on me, you know? So there was something in her voice that okay, you know what? I'm going to give this lady a chance. So she picked me up and she took me to her place and she kept me safe. And as soon as we got to her place, she like never gave up. She's a doctor and she didn't even go to work. Like she sat with me and we figured it out together, you know? And we get on the computer, look at places that I can go. She didn't care about money. She didn't care about anything. That's all I had was the clothes on my back and a knapsack, right? I had nothing else. And we just didn't give up. Like she sat beside me and we tried and tried. Anyway, there was a place in Windsor that came up and we called and they really didn't know my whole story. Like they didn't know that I was really human trafficked, but they knew I was a drug addict, right? And I kind of kept that a little bit secret until I got here. So I came to the Windsor Life Center, did my program, dealt with so much, like dealt with the drug addiction and dealt with stuff that happened when I was a child, dealt with the human trafficking. When I got here, I told them and they helped me as much as they could, but then they did like end up with people around here that kind of more support outside of the Windsor Life Center. So I ended up getting all the support that I needed and I graduated after 13 months and I decided to stay in Windsor and yeah, I've been here for 3 years now, clean and sober and yeah.
Okay. Obviously really moving, you know, and we thank Jen so much for telling us her story and allowing us to use her story to educate people on how to stay safe. But to kind of recap the act, the means, and the purpose, right? So going back to those things, the act is what is done to you. So we heard from Jen that she was certainly vulnerable. You know, as far as recruiting and selecting somebody to be trafficked, Jen had mentioned that she just ended her marriage. She was struggling with drug addiction, and her trafficker knew this, right? He knew these things and offered to meet her needs, became her boyfriend, gave her drugs and fed that addiction. And unfortunately, you know, addiction can be a very, very powerful motivator to exploit somebody. And that's very, very unfortunate, but this is what we see, right? So, that's part of Jen's recruitment. That's part of her story. And then also part of the act or what is done to you is housing or hiding. And we heard that, you know, Jen said at the beginning, she stayed in a home and it was really, really nice. And then before she knew it, she was laying on a basement floor with a blanket, right? So we see that there is that progression. It can start very legitimately where, you know, she's with her boyfriend and she's living in the house, but then ultimately she ends up on a basement floor. So that really, for Jen's story, certainly captures what we mean by the act. The means is how a trafficker gains control over you. So Jen was controlled really in two different ways. Grooming, right? Because Jen's trafficker posed as her boyfriend and created what looked like a perfect relationship. Jen was given gifts, money, and drugs, and her trafficker or her boyfriend, quote unquote, seemed like he knew better than anybody else how to take care of her. Right? But then ultimately that grooming turned into fear. And what Jen didn't say was that her boyfriend, who was her trafficker, was actually part of a dangerous motorcycle gang, pretty notorious motorcycle gang. So they used that fear and people in the community were very, very reluctant to help her because she knew they were tied to that motorcycle club, right? But they also branded her, which means they marked their logo on her body with a tattoo. And like I said, if she tried to get help or she tried to leave, that brand obviously would follow her and people would see that and they know what that meant, right? So fear was also used as a means to gain control in this scenario. And the purpose, why someone is trafficked, unfortunately, Jen was sexually exploited. So we see kind of now a little bit clearer as to how these things play into each other and how human trafficking is a process, right? So again, invite everybody to go to communitylivingessex.org/ASAP. to see the full curriculum and to see ways to keep yourself safe, because we talk about those in the curriculum. It's really, really important. So now we're going to talk about why people with an intellectual disability are vulnerable to victimization. So there's really 5 main reasons that I summarize in the curriculum as to why people with an intellectual disability are at particular risk of being victimized. The first is isolation. And some people may live alone with minimal social ties and receiving minimal funding for supports, right? So, I mean, not everybody lives in a 24-hour support location. There could be some people supported independent living and other, living scenarios where they may receive some minimal social ties as far as supports go and people coming in and out of their lives. Others living with family or in a residential setting may also experience limited contact with others. So these weaker social ties and minimal lasting relationships contribute to a deepened desire for social connections and a sense of belonging. And this can result in a propensity to be easily influenced by a potential friend because they're offering friendship. They're offering to meet these needs. People want these lasting relationships, and this person coming into their life, grooming them, right, for human trafficking, is coming in and offering to meet these needs, right? Isolation can also contribute to a lack of resources, right? I mean, like we said, knowledge and understanding how to keep yourself safe and knowing the signs of human trafficking are the best way to keep yourself safe. So the person may not be aware of who to contact or even know what human trafficking is based on some social isolation, right? So that's one of the main risk factors for people with intellectual disabilities. And certainly this isn't limited to people with intellectual disabilities. I mean, other people without an intellectual disability can feel some isolation as well. So again, I think the moral of this is it's not just people with intellectual disabilities that are at risk. Everybody is. And that's why this information is so important to get out to the public and so people realize that we have to stay safe and we have to stay aware. Another risk factor is poverty. And studies have shown that people with intellectual disabilities are at significantly greater risk of living in poverty. And this is largely due to a lack of employment opportunities and exclusion from the workforce. Due to this exclusion, for example, us in Ontario, people can live off of the income from the Ontario Disability Support Program, or ODSP. I don't know what the American equivalent of that would be, but that's what we have here in Ontario. So currently, that amounts to $1,169 a month for basic needs of shelter. So, I mean, representative of an annual income, this is $14,000 a year, $14,028 is what it amounts to. And, that's far below what's considered low income in the province of Ontario, which is $22,133 for a single person. So we can see that right out of the gate, people on ODSP, people with disabilities, are living in poverty, right? And of course, the opportunity to make money and to live a lavish lifestyle would be very appealing to somebody living below the poverty line. Absolutely. This population is also more likely to live in low-income housing, rely on others or on public transportation, and be dependent on staff or friends who may have questionable motives. These elements cultivated by poverty put people with an intellectual disability at higher risk of criminal victimization. So dependency is another risk factor. And again, most people living with an intellectual disability become dependent on someone, right? Be it support staff, be it a doctor, be it medical professionals to meet their social, emotional, and healthcare needs. Could be friends as well to help them with this, or other family members. People receiving supports may receive supports for their finances, where support staff has access to the person's money and personal care, such as bathing. These close relationships with support staff leave people receiving supports particularly vulnerable to potentially being exploited, right? Statistically, people with an intellectual disability are victimized by people they know, including care providers, acquaintances or neighbors, and family members, right? So that dependency and relying on other people could, unfortunately result in exploitation as well. Now, I'm sure you're all wondering about number 4, increased access to technology. One of the main ways that modern traffickers, particularly sex traffickers, gain access to victims is through social media. That's why we dedicate a whole section of our curriculum to social media safety, how to stay safe online, some of the red flags. And we pay a lot of attention to this in the curriculum. But over the past several years, increased opportunities have arisen for people with intellectual disabilities to access technology, which is fantastic. In our community living Essex County, people supported have the opportunity to receive smart support technology, or access to tablets or computing to facilitate independence, like through scheduling apps or PECS apps, things like that. But this increased access to tablets and internet also means increased access to social media, right? So we can see that this could pose a risk, which is why social media safety, even outside of the developmental services sector, is so important to teach teens, like I said, with and without an intellectual disability, because this is how people are gaining access to victims. And it is scary, but knowing the signs and being aware and proactive are the main ways that you can keep yourself or your loved ones safe. Finally, social prejudice. And, based on a disability, unfortunately, family, friends, or other members of the public may not necessarily believe a person who reports a victimization. But we want to give people these tools, in the community. We want to give justice providers these tools to really take into consideration what people are saying and take them seriously, because it may require direct support professionals. It may require family members to advocate for this person, to get them justice, and for people to truly understand what they're saying and believe them. It's sad and unfortunate, but it is true. Social prejudice is there, and that's why it's so vitally important that us as caregivers and providers and family members are advocating for the people that we support or our loved ones. So I do want to reiterate, we do have two separate curriculums. There is a public and a justice. So just kind of an overview of what those cover. Really where these topics came from, we decided to limit it to these topics. Obviously, we want to keep it concise. We want people to be able to access this fairly easily. We want communication to be accessible, but we don't want to overwhelm people either. Right? We want to give them exactly what they need to keep them safe and to educate them. So where these topics came from was our pre-data collection. So from August 30th, 2018 to October 26th, 2018, quantitative and qualitative data were gathered from people receiving supports and local police and justice personnel. So we went out and we asked people, what do you want to know? What do you think will keep you safe from becoming a victim of human trafficking or exploitation? And this is what we got from people. So the public curriculum is designed for people with intellectual disabilities, their loved ones, their support staff. So people want to know, what is exploitation and human trafficking? Again, it's very hard to understand because, like I said, human trafficking is a process, and we saw that. We saw how convoluted the process of human trafficking can be. Even survivors of human trafficking didn't realize they were being trafficked. So it's very important for people to understand what that is and how to stay safe. They wanted to know prevention strategies. So certainly plain language explanations of how to stay safe. So we're actually developing online games as well. To teach people how to stay safe as well. So stay tuned for those. And there's going to be some online gaming modules coming up in the very, very near future. Particularly one around social media safety and red flags. And they'll show you, if somebody messages you on Facebook, would you reply? Would you friend request somebody that you didn't know? So it provides a lot of different scenarios that people can actually go through and say, yes, I do this, or no, I wouldn't. And then it'll tell you if it's a safe answer or if it's not. So that is being developed currently right now. Hopefully those will be done in the very near future. And finally, who can help? Who do we reach out to if we feel that a loved one or, us or a friend are being trafficked? So we certainly provide those resources in the curriculum as well. And then we see the justice side of things as well. So what is an intellectual disability? The vulnerabilities and risk factors for people with intellectual disabilities, which we just talked about. How do you know whether a person may have an intellectual disability? Certainly this isn't something that you would ask somebody, but there are, there are ways that maybe you would know if they need additional support from the justice system. Tips for communicating with victims of human trafficking and exploitation with an intellectual disability. I think communication is fundamental. I mean, that's how we express our feelings, and this is how we communicate what our needs, right? So, communication tips are always vitally important. And then finally, resources to help support victims of human trafficking and exploitation with an intellectual disability. We provide that in the curriculum for justice as well. So again, I want to thank everybody for attending today and viewing this presentation. Hopefully you realize that this is a very important topic, and certainly please reach out to our website, communitylivingessex.org/ASAP, to view the full curriculum. And also you can certainly contact me at asap@communitylivingessex.org. That email goes to me. I am the project manager. I help build the project. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And again, really want to thank everybody for attending today. I'm going to stop sharing now. And then
Great.
I guess I will turn it over to you, Kim. And if I don't know if there's any questions that have come up, or if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That was a really informative presentation, again, on a topic that we don't discuss a lot. And I'll first open it to see if any of the people participating live have any questions. So I'll give it just a second. If you do, feel free to unmute and ask or post in the chat and I can read them. So it looks like maybe Katie has a question.
Yeah, I was wondering, I really liked how you talked about educating the police as well on these types of things. Is that part of their curriculum that they have or training that they do, that it's like embedded in it, or is it optional for them?
It is actually, we have gone to police detachments to do this. And I know a lot of police detachments in Ontario, they have standard training times, right? I mean, obviously the resources and the need for people in our law enforcement sector, it's quite high. I mean, they have a lot to do, right? So, opportunities for webinars, they don't come up very often for law enforcement. So, I mean, they set certain months aside, certain weeks in the month aside, specifically for, training and things like this. So we were fortunately able to kind of get into one of those a few times. So that's how we're kind of educating the police sector as well. I mean, unfortunately, prior to COVID, we had a really big lecture planned at the law school in Windsor, Ontario, which actually would have brought a lot of really great people to the table to learn about this. But unfortunately, COVID happened. But we do have online as well, so we've reached out to them in that regard. And I think just from our pre-data collection and reaching out to these law enforcement agencies, they don't get that education in regards to people with intellectual disabilities and how this relates to human trafficking, right? So that's kind of a niche area that we really wanted to fill with this project.
Great, thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Great. Any other questions from attendees who are here live?
Yeah, can I ask something, Kim? First of all, Brandon, thanks for that talk. I found it hugely interesting and informative. So thank you very much for that. And I was interested, and I noticed myself when you were talking, how much of what you were saying is relevant to the population in general and the need to understand and be educated in red flags to look out for. And I wonder to what extent you are targeting your materials, while obviously there are additional risks for people with intellectual disabilities and so on. I think the population in general needs to be educated in red flags to look out for. And so I wonder how you manage that balance of messaging.
It's a very good question. Thank you, Emma. And kind of like what I was saying throughout the project, a common question we get actually is, is there a different curriculum for people with intellectual disabilities? And the answer is no, there's not. This is the same material that we would give anybody, right? And what's good about As Safe as Possible is that it's accessible, right? We're not phrasing concepts of human trafficking in legal terms. We're not phrasing them in criminological or sociological terms. We're framing them in ways that people can grasp them and really hold on to them and understand. So I think fundamentally what was so important about As Safe as Possible is Jen and her story, right? Because I think that really illustrates, somebody survived this. They experienced this. They experienced the trauma. And this is what it looked like, right? It's not just a theoretical concept anymore at that point, it's a lived experience. And I think that's really what helped As Safe as Possible become more accessible, right? And that was our goal from the start. We wouldn't necessarily change the content per se. We want to give everybody the same content. We want equality. We want equitability in that regard, but we also want it to be accessible, and that was our main goal. So accessible language, right? Again, we're not relying on criminal code definitions. We're not relying on criminological concepts. We're relying on lived experience and something tangible that people can hold on to. So again, I mean, I don't think that's necessarily relevant just to the people that we support in the DS sector. I think that's relevant to everybody. I mean, my kids are a bit young. they're 6 and 8, but when they are a little bit older, I'm certainly going to be showing this to them too. I know that our representative from Children's Aid Society has shown this to several people, several teens that he supports who don't have intellectual disabilities. Studies have shown, there was an Australian study that showed that the people that were at most risk of being victimized through human trafficking was runaway, at-risk teenage female youths with an intellectual disability. So really, that's why we partnered with CAS, is because they are really supporting the most vulnerable people that could fall victim to these crimes. But I can definitely say that CAS, we are on their website too. Our link to this training is on their website. A link to this training is also through Legal Assistance of Windsor, and they don't just support people with intellectual disabilities. So I think it's a wraparound approach. I think we have to get as many people involved, and then certainly, as a result of the project, we sit at the same table as a lot of these service providers do. We Fight is a local anti-human trafficking group run through Legal Assistance of Windsor, and we work very closely with We Fight. I've referred people to We Fight. So support workers would come forward from even other areas, other places in Ontario, and they were concerned about the person they were supporting, and wanted to know who to reach out to, and of course, We Fight, because they have that wraparound approach, right? They have access to substance abuse counseling, to trauma counseling, to all of these other things that survivors of human trafficking that are exiting that lifestyle really need. So again, I hope that answers your question. I think a wraparound approach is really important, and as far as what to include and what not to include, we let our community partners and also the people we support tell us what to include and what they want to know. But as far as tailoring it down or changing it, we didn't change it. We just made it more accessible, if that makes sense.
I think that's a great principle for this type of work in general, when we are looking at topics that are emotionally challenging for people and contain quite challenging concepts in general, that the simpler and more accessible the messages are, then the more people can engage with the issues. So I think it's a great principle.
Absolutely, and something that we as an agency stand by as well. Accessibility in everything, not just language, in access, right? I mean, trying to navigate the internet, in an era where we're hosting all of these webinars and all of this. We know how difficult that can be, right? So trying to locate all of this information is also a way that we want to make this curriculum accessible. So everything is in one spot. It's right on the website. Everything is there. If you wanted to facilitate your own class, you can literally click a link and download the slides and you're good to go. Facilitators guides are there as well. The actual narrated presentation is there too. Everything's in the same spot. So communityliving.essex.org/ASAP will bring you there. And again, I mean, accessibility isn't just limited to language and understanding concept. It's also, accessibility, generally speaking, in that regard.
Brandon, it is so great that you have all those resources free and publicly available. I think one of the things I would encourage our network of the Break Exchange to share with others is those resources, and think about applying them to share with the individuals we serve, not just individuals with intellectual disabilities, but I think of individuals with physical disabilities that we serve in our programs, as well as the older adults. We have a lot of programs that are supporting respite for older adults that have often cognitive issues, and they are, I think, at greater risk. So I'm not sure that statistics on that, but all of these populations that we serve, when we look at respite supports and other caregiver supports, I think the populations we work with are at high risk. So ensuring that we can think about this topic as really important education and empowering resources for the people we work with, but also for the workers. So thinking about how are we training respite care workers and other staff to recognize those signs and intervene, and what are those resources to support. So I hope that's a good takeaway message for the Break Exchange. And if there's opportunities or people interested in sharing back what they do with some of these resources, I think, again, we're really trying to be collaborators and connectors. So encourage people to reach back out to Brandon and use the Break Exchange to share best practices and what's worked. And maybe there are some slight adaptations to materials that other people are doing. I'd really love to start a conversation on what are respite programs in different places around the world doing to help address victimization and recognize those early warning signs and train their staff and provide education to the people we serve in that area. I think, again, a really important topic for the populations we work with and something that we don't talk enough about. So grateful to have you here today, Brandon, sharing this important topic. I'll open it just for one more time. We have a couple minutes left if there's anyone else that has additional questions or comments before we go today that's live here. And I'm not seeing any. So again, I know people will be watching this recording and we'll definitely push this out to our network. And looks like Emma posted a comment about in Scotland it's
we just talked about
late and she's fading into the darkness in the background there. Well, I hope you have a good evening, Emma. It is lunchtime here in the US for us. But no, really thank you, Brandon, for being here today. Thank you for the great questions and engagements from those who are here live. And feel free to reach out. We will make sure to share this video broadly and provide your contact information, Brandon. So again, thank you all for participating and attending and watching this Break Exchange webinar, and hope that you all have a wonderful and safe rest of your day.